Hello and good evening, everyone. I'm Josh Olson, Executive Director of Angel Flight West, and welcome back to the Angel Flight West Pilot Lounge. Thanks for taking time out of your afternoon and evening to join us. We are joined today by three of my absolute favorite people. Former U.S. astronauts Garrett Reisman, Barbara Morgan, and Scott Parazynski have taken some time out of their day to join us. And we'll get to them soon. A couple of housekeeping items. If you are new to the Zoom webinar platform, if you look at the bottom of these links, you'll see some Q&A. We invite you to type in questions for our astronauts there. The chat button, you'll find lots of important, helpful links as we talk both with the astronauts and about Angel Flight West. And there is a host of other options down there to help with your process, and our great team at Angel Flight West will be updating folks throughout our webinar. So thanks again. First, a couple of updates from AFW operations I'd like to share with you. We have been fortunate enough to fly over 350 COVID-19 relief-related missions, which equates to over 76,000 tons of supplies, over 100 flights for medical personnel to travel to and from high impacted areas across the country. And we just want to say a big thank you to our volunteers making those flights possible, to our commercial airline partners, Alaska Airlines and Southwest Airlines, for donating those flights for those frontline workers. We feel very fortunate to be able to serve during this time, and we can't thank our volunteers enough for serving along those lines. And equally so, for those that have made the decision not to volunteer during this time, we thank you for your careful and thoughtful consideration for you, your family, and your loved ones as we try to keep everyone safe, but still make sure that the collateral damage of this pandemic isn't greater than the actual damage. Along those lines, we continue to work with our healthcare partners to pivot to meet the need the best way we can. Obviously, there's still a lot of folks who are traveling to advanced treatment that couldn't otherwise get there safely, and we're here to serve those. If you've been to our past webinars, you know all our enhanced safety guidelines, and you can find those on our website if you're interested in looking. Right now, because there's spikes in different territories, and specifically we serve mostly the western half of the United States and partner with our other Angel Flight partners for the other parts of the United States, we pivot based on the supply and demand out there. Right now, we're seeing a lot of rescheduling and postponing of appointments. Occasionally, our passengers who are more immune compromised, their physicians are encouraging them to try to find family that can drive them, that they are sheltering with, or drive themselves if that's possible. So we're going to do our best to keep everyone safe and get to the healthcare we need. And we're going to continue that because that's our mission and that's what we're all about. And so we look forward to serving those patients, to serving the supply missions in Colorado and Arizona, to serve the tribal nations in Arizona and New Mexico and surrounding areas, to get them PPE and supplies that they're desperately short on. And again, we feel fortunate and blessed to do that. We thank you for your support, and you can continue to support us. As I always say, I probably sound like a broken record, but the most valuable thing anyone can do to help Angel Flight is to volunteer with their time. That's your most valuable resource. Obviously, like a lot of folks, we're heavily affected financially by this pandemic. Normally Barbara, Scott, and Garrett would be joining us at the Endeavour Awards, where we raise about a third of our support. Unfortunately, we can't have that. We couldn't have that this year, and we may not be able to have it next year. So our finances are taking a hit. So if you're in a position where you can donate, or maybe donate more than you have, we encourage you to do that, and we would welcome that. Because your support helps us sustain and keep the operations at the level that we need to. As you know, our costs are all donated by the pilots. Our costs are only platform costs. So that's people, technology, and space. And so we want to continue to do that without disruption to our passengers and our volunteer. We're also thank you to all those who've signed up. If you're a new Angel Flight member, we've had a record-breaking couple of months in terms of new volunteers. So thank you for that. I know a lot of you are completing your orientation and submitting your paperwork and so forth. And we want to thank you for that. And for those of you who are on the fence about volunteering, we encourage you to do that as well. And again, all those links to do each of those things is in your chat function right now. And you can look there to volunteer. And you can always reach out to us, info@angelflightwest.org, or if you have a specific question to me, josh@angelflightwest.org. We'd welcome any of those questions or concerns that you might have. With all that said, we want to turn it over to the stars of the show that I mentioned earlier. So I'm going to introduce Garrett Reisman first. Garrett is an engineer and former NASA astronaut who flew on all 3 space shuttles. His first mission in 2008 was aboard the Endeavour, which dropped him off for a 95-day stay on the International Space Station. He returned to Earth on the Discovery. His third mission in 2010 was aboard the Atlantis. On these missions, he performed 3 spacewalks and operated the space station robot arm. He was also an aquanaut, serving as a crew member on Nemo 5, living on the bottom of the sea in the Aquarius deep underwater habitat for 2 weeks. Garrett is a professor of astronautical engineering in the Viterbi School at USC and a senior advisor to SpaceX. Thank you, Garrett, so much for joining us. I'm going to introduce everyone, and then we'll get into specific questions for each of these folks. So Barbara Morgan, who I mentioned earlier, she is a teacher and former NASA astronaut. She participated in the Teacher in Space program as a backup to Christa McAuliffe for the ill-fated 1986 Space Shuttle Challenger mission. In 1998, she was selected to NASA's Astronaut Corps, and in August 2007, flew into space aboard Space Shuttle Endeavour to help construct the International Space Station. Her duties included operating the shuttle and station robotic arms. Prior to her astronaut career, Barbara taught public elementary school for 24 years on the Flathead Indian Reservation in Montana, in a small mountain town in Idaho, and in Quito, Ecuador. She retired from NASA to serve as a distinguished educator in residence, now emeritus, at Boise State University, advising, leading, and representing the university in policy and program development, advocacy, and mentoring in STEM, science, technology, engineering, and mathematics. And our third guest today is Scott Parazynski. Scott Parazynski is a physician and astronaut, inducted into the U.S. Astronaut Hall of Fame in 2016. He has lived and traveled all over the world, spending many of his grade school years in places like Senegal, Lebanon, Iran, and Greece. In 1992, he was selected to join NASA's Astronaut Corps and eventually flew 5 space shuttle missions. Career highlights including leading the first joint US-Russia spacewalk while docked to the Russia space station Mir. Scott is a prolific inventor, product developer, and serves on the boards of several companies. He is founder and CEO of Fluidity Technologies, focused on the development of revolutionary input devices powered by machine learning to intuitively move through physical and virtual space. Garrett, Barbara, and Scott, thank you so much for joining us today. We're incredibly grateful for your support of Angel Flight West and the Endeavour Awards. I wish I was with you under the Space Shuttle Endeavour tonight, toasting the amazing work that you've done and how aviation inspires others, and most importantly, how aviation can give back through great organizations like Angel Flight. So we've got a lot of questions for you. We won't get through them all today. We may try to twist your arms and talk you into coming back to answer some of these another time. But we just want to say thank you again for coming. And for those of you watching at home, please send in your questions for Garrett, Barbara, and Scott at that Q&A at the bottom of our questions, or at the bottom of the screen. And like I said, we'll try to get through as many of those questions as possible. And before we jump into the Q&A, I do have a few questions to get us started tonight. So Barbara, we'll start with you. I just mentioned you're the first ever mission specialist educator after dismantling the Teaching in Space program. So what sort of projects did you work with NASA on prior to start training to be an astronaut?
Okay, great question. And by the way, thanks for saying you would be toasting us, Josh, but we 3 would be toasting you and all of the volunteers too for Angel Flight West. We love the mission, and we're just really thrilled to be able to help support it in our small way. So thank you. And I do have a LaCroix, maybe I guess I can toast with a LaCroix. So for many years between Teacher in Space program and joining the class of astronauts with Garrett, the Penguin class, had the opportunity to work with NASA's Education Division, where we worked on a lot of different curriculum programs, to get kids of all ages, K through 12, through grade school and junior high and high school, engaged in really hands-on ways and fun ways with science, technology, engineering, and mathematics, and especially focused on space exploration because it's such a great draw. Kids love space, as we do.
Yeah, absolutely. I know my my kids do as well, and they've got a couple questions later, so I'll ask those. But a little sensitive information, and I know you probably get asked this a lot, but we were getting this question a lot ahead of time. But following the Columbia disaster, the Endeavour sustained some damage on takeoff, and we're curious what your thoughts and comments on that situation might be.
Yeah, so we got the call as soon as we got into orbit that the high-speed cameras, the Air Force's high-speed cameras, had seen what they thought was a piece of the external tank falling off and hitting the bottom of our orbiter, and that's similar to what happened with Columbia, although this was the bottom of the orbiter rather than the wing leading edge. And we had great confidence in our ground team, all the engineers and the scientists who were really studying the problem. I know it's hard to, it's kind of hard to wrap your head around sometimes that we honestly were not worried. We had jobs to do. We were really excited to get them done. We were helping to build the International Space Station. So we went off and did the work that we were sent up to do. At the same time, we took our space shuttle robotic arm, grabbed a big boom. At the end of the boom are a bunch of lasers and cameras, and we took that underneath the orbiter and did a survey to see if we could find that damage, which we were able to find, took a lot of pictures of it, sent it down to the ground team. And then we were working with our ground team on a possible contingency spacewalk where we were going to put one of our spacewalkers on the end of the boom, on the end of the arm, and underneath the orbiter with a repair material that had been developed and tested on the ground, but we had never tested it in space yet. We did not have a lot of high confidence in that material. It was kind of like an epoxy material, and it kind of bubbled on the ground, and we just thought we were going to have trouble with it in space. Plus, that's such a fragile area of the space shuttle. We figured if we were really going to do that, where we didn't have good camera views other than the spacewalkers' helmet camera views, we were worried. The one thing we were worried about is if we had to do that, we would do more damage than was already there. So, so luckily that hole happened to be in a location on the bottom of the orbiter that, after all the engineering analysis that was done on the ground, it looked like it was only going to be exposed to about 350, 400 degrees rather than 2000 degrees that much of the bottom of the orbiter gets. So we were cleared for landing and for re-entry and landing, and we were really glad that we did not have to go out and do the repair work. So I mentioned that we were not worried about it other than we weren't worried about re-entry and landing. We were worried more about us doing more damage. But we did find out later, after we got back to Earth, that it was really hard on our families. So, and we know we've got families with Angel Flight West who are going through some really hard times. So that was tough. And it was tough for us to know that it was really hard on our families, even though we couldn't be there with them to help them.
Yeah, I can't imagine what a situation, and so grateful that it worked out the way it did and everyone was able to maintain safe. Garrett, let's move over to you real quick. What was your first impression of Earth?
My first impression of Earth. Well, I was really looking forward to that. I mean, that first view of Earth from out the window of the space shuttle is something that you dream about as an astronaut, or even before you become an astronaut, is something that was going to be like a really impactful moment. So I remember I got up there and I didn't look out the window right away because I was down in the mid deck. There's an upper deck and a lower deck in the shuttle, and I was down below, and there's only one window down there, and it's in the hatch. It's only about this big around, and it's over in the corner. So you have a lot of work to do when you first get up there. So I got really busy. I was trying to do all the stuff I'm supposed to do, all these housekeeping things. And then after about a half an hour, I saw this pale blue glow coming from that window. And I was like, oh, you know, that's the Earth. I should go have a look at that. But I wanted to be sure I was ready. So I paused, I closed my eyes, and I, whatever you want to call it, you know, meditated or just got ready. And when I felt like I was mentally prepared, I floated up to that window and I opened my eyes and I gazed out for the very first time at the Earth from space. Now, what that felt like in that moment is a very difficult thing to put into words. It's really, really hard to describe. But if I were to say like what I was feeling deep inside at that moment, the word I would use would be meh. I mean, it was pretty, you know, had a lot of those like greens and browns. It had a lot of those earth colors, and it was nice. It's nice, but I don't know, man. There was like, it was kind of a letdown. I mean, there was no heavenly choir. I didn't grab all my crewmates' hands and sing Kumbaya. Like none of that happened. Okay, I was expecting that. None of that happened. And I think it's, you know, I'm sure, look, I'm sure like John Glenn, right? And like Yuri Gagarin, when they first looked out the window and they had no idea what to expect, I'm sure it was overwhelming. But look, we've all seen pictures of Earth from space, right? I mean, we got HD video coming down from it. You can see stuff in that video that you can't see with your own eyes. You can see like details of the aurora and stuff that you can't see. So I'm like, you know, and maybe that's why. Maybe it's because my expectations were so high.
I think you've been jaded by your Hollywood experiences. There was no soundtrack to underscore it. There was no.
Right. Where was the music? Maybe if there was a music and you know, a supporting actor, that would have helped.
Chariots of Fire.
No, didn't happen.
Good.
Tough to impress, Garrett, man.
I know. I know, it's very disappointing. But to balance that out, I gotta tell you, so like that was not the transformative event that I was expecting. But and Scott and Barb, if you feel the same way, let me know. But what really did hit me hard and left a very, very strong impression was not looking down at the Earth, but looking at the horizon. Because when you look at the horizon, as you guys know, you see this very thin blue line, this little tiny sliver, and that's the atmosphere. And when you see that with your own eyes, it really is scary because it looks so fragile. It looks like that can just be stripped away with a gust of wind. I mean, all that black stuff around it is vacuum, and it's amazing that the atmosphere, which is all the air we have to breathe and provides all of our fresh water, it's amazing that it hangs around. I mean, I could do the math, and I know the laws of physics that allow it to happen, but it seems like a miracle when you see that with your own eyes. And it gave me an impression that the skies are not vast and limitless. And when I stand on the shores in Los Angeles and look out to the ocean, it doesn't seem to go on forever anymore. It seems very finite, and it gave me a sense that our planet is something that is a huge planet, but the part of it that matters is actually quite finite and limited, and something that we are perfectly capable of messing up.
Some good perspective there. Garrett, as the 5th crew to participate in the NASA Extreme Environmental Mission Operations, or for those Pixar fans, easily known as NEMO, NEMO 5 in your case, how do you compare the underwater experience to the space experience and the time difference that you spend in each?
Well, yeah, so we lived in the bottom of the sea in this habitat called Aquarius for a couple of weeks, and down there, compared to being up in space, there it was a lot more humid. All right, it was very damp in there, but it was great. And the thing that made it such a great analog for training for going up to the space station is you were isolated down there the same way you're up in space. In fact, the time it would take to get to a hospital if you're having a medical emergency was about 24 hours, whether you're coming from this habitat or if you're coming from the space station. It takes about the same time. And that's because we're saturation diving. We were down at 60 feet which it works out to be about 20,000 millimeters under the sea in that habitat. And at that depth, normally, with your recreational diving, you could stay there for about 60 minutes. And then you have to come up, or you risk having too high of a concentration of nitrogen in your blood, and you'll get the bends if you stay down there any longer. But if you go down there and you stay there, then it's not a problem. You can stay as long as you want. As long as you don't come up, you're going to be fine. And eventually your bloodstream gets saturated with nitrogen. And once you reach that point, the only way to come up is through a very controlled and slow decompression process. That takes about a day. So you are physically removed from civilization in temporal space, in the amount of time it would take. It's the same as you're on the space station. And that is a real world analog that worked quite well.
And there's an infamous story about you needing to use the bathroom undersea with a huge Goliath grouper. Can you tell us a little bit about that story?
Yeah. Right. So one day, okay. So really, a lot of being an astronaut is basically advanced potty training. Okay. And that goes for up in space, and it goes for when you do these NOLS expeditions and you have to leave no trace. And it also goes for when you're down in the bottom of the ocean in this Aquarius thing. So when you have to go, so basically that habitat, if you can you put up that picture of the habitat again? If you can go back to that, I can point it out to you. But in the end of that habitat, there's a big open moon pool. And if any of you have seen the movie The Abyss, it's like when you're inside the habitat. There we go. Thank you. When you're inside the habitat, over to the right, you see that white thing. That'll become very important in just a moment. But just behind that white thing is an opening. The only reason the habitat doesn't flood with water is that the air pressure inside is a little bit greater than the hydrostatic pressure at depth. So a little bit of air leaks out and no water comes in. But there's a big opening. It's like a glass that you take in a tub and you turn it upside down, you capture the air and it traps the air bubble inside and no water goes inside. It's like that. So you could just go up to that pool and hop in and boom, you're out in the middle of the Atlantic Ocean. And you swim over to, if you need to do number 2, okay, what you do is you swim over to that white thing that we call the gazebo. And it's just a little dome is all that is, a little hemisphere. And it's also got an air bubble inside. So you swim out to that thing, you stick your head in there and float around until and you're from your chest down, you're in the water, and you just hang out in there and you do what you need to do. Okay. But here's the problem is that like the fish get used to this, and it's like ringing the dinner bell. So as soon as anybody drops into the water to go to the gazebo, schools of fish come like flocking from all directions, and to get a little taste of your what you didn't use there. Yeah. So anyway, the angelfish are the worst, and it's not angel flight, but angelfish. They're terrible because they're shaped just right. They can like really be problematic. So anyway, you're out there and you're doing what you need. And one night I had to do this at night, which is like what you really dread. So I go out there at night and I don't have a scuba tank or anything. And I'm just out, I'm 60 feet down, saturated. I can't go to the surface in the middle of the Atlantic Ocean at night. And I have to swim over to that gazebo. And I could see it because it's lit up. So I swim to it and I pop in the gazebo. I'm like, relieved that, but now I'm hanging out there in the gazebo. And like every one of those like scary sea movies are going through my head, like Jaws, you know, the Meg or whatever, all those scary movies. I'm thinking, and you hear like the water is like lapping against the dome, and you're thinking bump 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 bump, bump, you know, whatever, and it's kind of scary. And then when you're done, I'm relieved, and I'm at the end of my mission now. I can go back. And I go down underwater, and as soon as I go underwater to go back, I open my eyes underwater, and I see that I'm looking at an eyeball about this big. I'm staring right into the unblinking eye of a massive Goliath grouper. I mean, this fish, it's like a cow. It's hundreds of pounds, and it's staring right at me. And I realize I'm no longer the top of the food chain, and I freaked out. And so I swam back as fast as I could into the moon pool, and I surfaced and I started screaming, and my whole crew come running thinking that, like, you know, there's some kind of emergency, like the habitat's going to sink or something. And I'm like, big fish, big freaking fish. And that was it.
Well, we're glad you're still here with us, Garrett. So we know that the Dragon and its crew is coming back this weekend, but I think you, if I remember correctly or heard correctly, for all of our volunteer pilots out there, Garrett flies at Cirrus. Could you share a little bit with us about your Cirrus flight from LA to Kennedy Space Center to bid goodbye to your friend and colleague who is on that ship right now, Bob?
Yeah, sure. So when I when I left NASA in 2010, at the very end of 2010, I went and I took a job at SpaceX, and I worked there for 7 years in various different capacities, but all working on the Crew Dragon program. So I spent a lot, and that was, like 7 years of SpaceX, that's like dog years. It's like 49 years to like a human, right? So I had a lot invested in this thing. And even though I'm not working there full time anymore, I'm just a consultant there, I really wanted to be there to see it go and be a part of all that. So, but we had this pandemic, and I promised my family I'd be really safe. So I'm like, well, I got an airplane, I can get there myself, and not have to go to an airport or anything. So I did that. So I hopped in. There's some shots, and so I hopped in. I flew over to the Kennedy Space Center, and was there for the launch, and it was spectacular. But the flight over there was really exciting as well. What's that? So we see these pictures. So the flight over there was very interesting. I actually managed to get from Los Angeles, so see the shining sea with just one stop. And that was in Kerrville, Texas. So I spent one night in Texas, and I only flew 2 legs. I got all the way to Titusville and right to the other coast, and was there for the launch. It was great. Yeah, there's a Mississippi. It was a real cross country, so that was kind of cool.
Cool. And can you share any plans of doing something similar for Sunday, or any surprises that we might be in store for?
Well, yeah, so I can tell you right now that so far, we are go on the primary and alternate sites for the return on Sunday, which is really remarkable considering there's a hurricane coming up the coast. But we have sites in the Gulf of Mexico in addition to the ones in the Atlantic. So 2 Gulf of Mexico sites are currently green. That could change if that hurricane veers a little bit to the west. It's a very volatile situation. So stay tuned. But as of 6 o'clock this morning, anyway, the 48-hour weather brief was go. So I plan to be right here. I'm way up in the Pacific Northwest, and I'm going to be covering it for the Science Channel and Discovery Channel on their webcast, along with 2 other former astronauts, Mike Massimino, and I think Leland Melvin is going to be joining us too. So I'll be here, and you can tune in to Discovery Channel or Science Channel, either one, and we'll be bringing the coverage live, and hoping that the weather stays good, and we actually, and if it's not Sunday, it's whenever it happens, they'll wave off, and we'll get another opportunity within a day or 2.
Very cool. Can't wait to watch.
Yeah.
And our next guest asked me specifically to save the best for last. Without further ado, Scott Parazynski, welcome. So for mission STS-120, unplanned EVA to repair solar panel on the ISS. Question for you, do astronauts always prepare to do an EVA if necessary?
Well, first off, I've got to say something to Garrett. I think he's ruined the tranquility of gazebos for the rest of my life. I'm going to be traumatized by that visceral experience that he had there. So thanks for that, G-Dog. Hey, and the other thing I wanted to say is, first off, thank you to all of the pilots and volunteers of this organization. It's great that you're there to serve your fellow Americans in a time of great need. I'm a physician by training, and I've treated patients who have been benefited by the work that you do. It's life-changing, and please keep on doing what you're doing. So I'm sorry, Josh, you asked about STS-120, and I think just about whether or not there's a plan for spacewalking on every mission. Is that what you'd ask?
Yeah, the unplanned EVAs. Yeah.
Yeah, so NASA loves acronyms. We use lots of long words. So, instead of saying spacewalking, we say extravehicular activity, which is really, really long. So to shorten it, we say EVA. And so I'll probably drop that term, and my colleagues probably will too. But on every flight, we would actually train for contingencies, and all sorts of things, can and on some occasions has happened on our missions. So we need to be prepared. And that's one of the things I loved about NASA. It's just its general preparedness for anything that might happen. We trying to figure out what might break, and then we have a plan B and a plan C to hopefully have in our toolkit or skill set the ability to fix things on the fly. But on occasion, things crazy out of the blue happen, like the photographs that you're seeing here. I can talk about it a little bit later if you'd like, but we had to go out in an unscripted way. This had never been envisioned. Fix a live solar panel that had been damaged in a really unique and difficult way. But it's imperative, first and foremost, that we make it a round trip. I'm also a mountaineer, and so the analog that I use is climbing big mountains. It's not making the summit; it's making it a round trip, right? So you've got to think about everything that you might need to do to make that a round trip. So we had all sorts of tools on board the space shuttle so that we could actually repair a space shuttle, hopefully, and bring the crew back home and continue the mission another day. And then there are unscripted situations like Barb, or Babs as I have always known her, describe where things happen to the shuttle or the space station. You've got to work off of the sheet of music, things that hadn't been envisioned before. And on my last flight, what was shown was a damaged solar panel at the very tip of the space station, further than we'd ever gone before. And it was fully energized. We couldn't turn it off. When even in the Earth's shadow, behind the Earth, it's still generating lots and lots of electricity. And spacewalking astronauts in a fully pressurized spacesuit, 100% oxygen, we're like a ticking time bomb. Any electricity into that spacesuit, fire or explosion, it's not a pretty sight. So the teams on the ground actually had to come up with first off a way to get spacewalking astronauts, myself and my buddy Doug Wheelock, out to the very tip of the space station using this cobbled together, jury-rigged robotic arm and an extension boom out to the this 90-foot long, basically a springboard. It was pretty wild to be at the end of this 90-foot long boom and having to kind of do surgery on a patient that was kind of ephemeral. It would actually, if you would touch it with a tool, it would kind of tend to float away. And it was like a giant golden, beautiful sail. But of course, it was also deadly. If I had any direct contact with my spacesuit, there could be arcing into my spacesuit, and those bad things could happen. So, but what I love about NASA is its preparedness, the thoroughness of the training, and then the ability to take things that are off script like this and to be resolute, to come up with brilliant solutions on the fly. Like Barb described, to get spacewalking astronauts underneath the space shuttle to repair damage in the tile, or out to the tip of the space station to repair a live solar panel. There's so many Apollo 13 moments in the history of the space program that you've never heard about. But it all comes down to people. It's not just the crews that are on board the craft, but it's the flight directors, the flight controllers, the instructors, the engineers, the scientists that all are all pulling together. And quite honestly, as an old retired geezonaut, I kind of miss that. It's wonderful to be part of a mission that's larger than life like that. I think Angel Flight has a mission that's larger than life as well. But I probably said enough about that, Josh.
No, it's great. And, as I'm listening to you, encouraging to know that, our country, our world is full of people that are used to making smart decisions and working as a team to solve really complex problems, and something that gives me hope for our current disaster or crisis or pandemic.
Now more than ever, right?
Yeah, exactly. So thanks for that. You mentioned being a climber, and I also understand that you've explored a little bit of the Masaya volcano. I think I'm saying that right, in Nicaragua.
Right.
And you went with a team in 2016 at ASU. Can you tell us a little bit about that and compare that perhaps to what that experience was to being in space and maybe which is more volatile?
Pun intended. Yeah, the craziest thing I've ever done. I mean, it's not like having an angelfish in the gazebo. I mean, that's another league. I can't even touch that. But the the most extraordinary, uncontrolled, uncontained environment I've ever been in is actually going to Nicaragua as part of a scientific expedition to implant a sensor network around one of the 10 lava lakes in the world. There are only a handful at any one time around the planet. This is the youngest lava lake in the world. It's about 1,200 feet down. We had to set up essentially a steel braid cable, a zip line, if you will, that was controlled by a winch, but incredibly dangerous to get down there. We had professional climbers, riggers, and others like myself to go down there. And we implanted a sensor network, not only around the summit, caldera summit, but down adjacent this lava lake. And the goal of the expedition essentially was to put this volcano online. Imagine if you could have a chemical signature, temperature, humidity, partial pressures of critical gases, and you could sleuth out predictive models of eruptive activity so that you could inform the 2 million people who live very close proximity to this volcano, the citizens of Managua, Nicaragua. There are 800 million people around the world who live in close proximity to volcanoes. And it would be amazing if we could actually have these sensors and algorithms that would tell us that something bad is about to happen. It's time to evacuate. And we live in an era where we can use big data analytics and machine learning and other tools to actually tease out really important lessons. And as a physician, I see the same kind of opportunity. Listening to our bodies. God forbid you end up in an intensive care unit. There's terabytes of data per second that's coming from your body that we're not really listening to. We're not smart enough to really get ahead of. But if we could predict that you're about to become septic or have a heart attack or pulmonary embolism, or what about if you're just at home and you're eating well and you're staying healthy, but you've had some change in your microbiome or some parameters changed to get ahead of serious illness. And we live in a time when those kinds of things are starting to happen. And I get really excited about that. Obviously, we live in a time when the planet is in a world of hurt for so many different reasons. But I'm optimistic. I think ultimately we are going to find vaccines and treatments for COVID, and hopefully get ahead of the next pandemics, and then also use our smarts to have early warnings for other types of advanced disease, and hopefully live longer, higher quality lives. But I'll get off my soapbox now. Oh, I'm not hearing yet, Josh.
Sorry. No, I was just going to say thank you for the soapbox. Fascinating stuff, and thanks for the work you're doing to help the world, really, and all of us. I'll open up to questions now. We got a lot of here, so I know we only have about 15 minutes left, so we'll try to push through a lot of these, and some of them are repetitive, so we can cover it. But Scott, since we just talked to you, one of your close friends, Mark Wolpert, the first question is, how many of the three of you really thought you wanted to be an astronaut when you were little kids?
This one here, I don't know. 1, 2.
I wish, but I was a girl, and I'm old, and when I was growing up, it was just all guys. We didn't see girls doing it. And so I'm just grateful that I'm alive now at a time when girls can do this. And I'm especially excited for our young girls, for them to know, if there are any young women out there just watching and talking with us, just know that whatever you set your mind to do, you can do it. There will be people who try to stop you. Same with the young boys. There are going to be people who say, oh, you can't do that. You're not this, you're not that. But don't listen to it. Just if it's something you are really passionate about and want to do, go for it.
Barbara's a great role model.
Absolutely. Absolutely. So we had a few of those along those lines. Barbara, you already touched on it, but Garrett and Scott, for those wanting to get in a similar field as the two of you, what would your recommendation be to our younger audience?
You want me to go ahead? Camera's on you.
Go.
Oh, okay. Well, one thing that I tell young people right now is that it's no longer just NASA. And in fact, Garrett's a great example. He's working for this great company called SpaceX, but there's Virgin Galactic, Blue Origin, and many other companies that are going to be taking people to space. And in fact, I think it's human destiny to colonize Mars, something that Elon Musk wants to do. We're going to have a lunar outpost, hopefully in the next decade or so, akin to what we have on the South Pole. The Amundsen Scott South Pole Base is a place that I've had the opportunity to visit. But I think it's human nature to explore. We have the tools now, the methods of travel to get there. And so it's a wide open world. I think NASA is an incredible place to work. And they're always going to be looking for bright young people trained in math, science, engineering, and medicine, and even in the arts. So there'll be opportunities there, but there are going to be many other opportunities in other fields. We'll be sending artists to space and musicians and maybe politicians. Some of them we might want to send on a one-way trip. But go ahead, Garrett.
No, I think you got that exactly right. And I was just going to point out that really all of us did something else before we were astronauts. We were either physicians like Scott, or educators like Barbara, or engineers like myself, or military test pilots. We have a veterinarian astronaut. But so there's many different paths to the launch pad. But the one thing we all had in common is, and it's the same thing if you want to help us at SpaceX, or if you want to go work for Blue Origin, you got to be good at math, for any of those things, right? And science, math and science. So the STEM fields are super important. And when I talk to kids, I tell them that, look, when you're like sitting in your elementary school classroom or junior high school learning algebra for the first time, you might not realize it, but you're doing astronaut training. That's the very beginning of your astronaut training program. So do well.
That's great. Thanks, guys. We've had several questions too, talking about maybe perhaps the scariest experience, or what the scariest thing about a mission or training for being an astronaut. Could you touch on that? There was any times that certain things made you more anxious than others?
Barb, you're up.
Yeah, you make a decision. If this is something you really want to do, you make a decision that that's what you want to do. And then you work really hard, like you've been working your whole life, really hard. And you learn all that you can. You know that the people around you are learning all that they can. And you just train up as best you can. Your crew trains up as best you can. And that's not just the crew that's on board the International Space Station, or on board SpaceX, or on board the shuttle. It's all of the support folks too, all of the ground team people. And you trust each other, and you really go forward with a happy heart. I cannot think of anything scary. That if anything's scary, it's that you don't want to screw up.
Garrett, how about you?
There are certain times I'm not as brave as Barb. She's got like nerves of steel, but there were a couple of times I was a little scared, and I remember instances during some of my spacewalks, some of my EVAs, where there were times that were a little touchy. But and I remember we were getting ready to come home on Discovery, and a piece of the space shuttle actually broke off and started floating away. And most of the pieces of the space shuttle you need. Okay, so it was
Garrett,
the best.
Garrett,
and
you break it, you buy it.
Sorry.
You break it, you buy it.
yeah, right. You should have seen the bill. But yeah, so there, all those things turned out to be just fine, and in the end, it was no big deal. I would say the scariest thing I ever did as an astronaut, by far, actually, with hands down, is throwing out a first pitch at a baseball game. I mean, I know you guys saw Dr. Fauci recently kind of throw a little wide, but my heart went out to him, because that is a terrifying thing. That is a super terrifying thing.
Did you make it to home, Garrett?
Yeah, I made it home. Yeah.
Oh, good. Garrett's son is a little leaguer, so I'm sure he was pulling for you on that stage. Scott, how about you? Any scary experiences or?
Yeah, well, I'll tell an embarrassing story about myself. Yeah, I don't mind. We're amongst family and friends here, but yeah, my very first flight into space, I was on the flight deck of the Space Shuttle Atlantis, and I was the MS-1, so I was seated right next to the flight engineer, right behind the pilot. The commander was up and to the left of me, and I had talked to everybody that had ever flown before, been in hundreds of hours of simulations. I'd been in a centrifuge, I'd done parabolic flight. Of course, I trained in the water tank. I thought I knew what was going to happen, and so the anticipation builds. Finally, after 11 months of training, we're on the launch pad, and come out of the T-minus 9-minute hold, and things start to get serious. The bad jokes had kind of quieted down. We're just okay, butterflies are building. We may actually go into outer space today, and so we're checking each other. We're turning on the APUs and making critical steps, because in just a few short minutes we're going to be lurching off of the planet, and we hope that everybody's tightened the bolts to the right torque, and everything's the shuttle's going to go in the right direction, and but we leave the planet, and huge sense of vibration and acceleration, 3G squeezing you back into your seat, all that kind of stuff, and then we have this thing called staging. It's when the solid rocket boosters there's a big burst of light, and they separate from the space shuttle, and they'll actually drop into the ocean. I'm about to get hit by lightning, by the way, here in San Antonio, and they drop into the ocean underneath parachutes. But what happens after that staging, at 2 minutes into the flight, is there's a precipitous drop in acceleration. So instead of having a gorilla sitting on your chest or a sumo wrestler, it feels like you're kind of lurching out of your seat. You're still feeling about a G.5, but relatively speaking, it's a big transition. And for an instant, I thought, my God, we've lost all of our engines. We're going to fall like a falling leaf back to the ocean. We've had a complete engine out, and game over. But I look across the flight deck. Everybody's kind of doing their thing, and one potato, two potato, and I realize, okay, it's supposed. We're still going to space today. But that was the biggest kind of jaw drop that I had in my career.
Wow, I'd say. Scott, I'll stay with you since we have you. One of our viewers is asking, as a physician in space, did you ever perform medical duties? And if yes, does the ambient in space make the work different?
Well, yeah, actually, everything is different. Any kind of task that you do in space is very, very different. So, if you set your tablet down, you set down any kind of tool or instrument down, and you don't Velcro, tape it, bungee it, put it in a locker, it's gone in 30 seconds. And you may find it in what we call the cabin air cleaner, or the circulating fan in about 2 days' time. So the prevailing air currents in the shuttle or the space station, the kind of, they vanish. Eventually you're going to find it, but you have to really think about everything you're going to do. So one of my flights was kind of cool. I got to fly with my boyhood hero, John Glenn, when he returned to flight at age 77. Of course, he's one of the Mercury 7 astronauts. And so I was his, among other things, his personal physician and bloodletter. So I had to draw, gallons of his blood. And so getting set up to do that, I had to have a big roll of gray tape, duct tape, set up on the wall, and my catheters, my bandages, my gauze, alcohol swabs, the tools for disposal of these things had to be all kind of set out. And if you weren't prepared, if you didn't do that, you get halfway through procedure and you were out of luck. So yes, I've done lots of different minor things, I would say, IV infusions and blood draws and things of that nature. But my colleagues are all in very, very good shape. It's a physical job, so we're encouraged to work with strength and conditioning coaches. So everyone went into flight in pretty good condition and maintained that during the flight. We've had a few people have some more significant issues on longer duration flight that we can talk about later if we have time.
Okay, thanks, Scott. Barbara, couple of questions about being a station robotic arm operator. What kind of tasks does that include, and how did it work? And Garrett, perhaps you could touch on that too.
Yeah, so on our flight on STS-118, where we were helping construct the International Space Station, I mostly worked with the Space Shuttle robotic arm, but also the Space Station arm as well. So for one of the very first things we did with our Space Station arm was did a full inspection of the wing leading edges, the top of the orbiter. And to do that, I kind of mentioned it earlier, we took the robot arm, we grappled a boom that we had stowed in the back of the payload bay. And then we spent hours, literally, we actually did it 3 different days, about 6 hours each, maneuvering the arm to inspect all the parts of the orbiter that could have some damage that would not be good for us. So then also we used the arm to add a piece of the truss. We took up a piece of the truss called stubby, because it was a short little piece. And we added it onto, so the existing truss that is the big beam that sits on top of the space station that holds a bunch of equipment, including the solar arrays out at the end that you saw that Scott repaired. So on the starboard side, we had one set of solar arrays, and then we added that little piece of truss to the end so that the crew after us could bring up the last set of solar arrays on that side. And we used the arm to do that. We used both the Space Shuttle and Space Station arm. And then we also took up a stowage platform. This is a platform that weighs about 7,000 pounds on Earth. It had a bunch of spare parts on it, like an ammonia tank, and a spare end effector for the Space Station robotic arm, a bunch of computers. And we were pre-positioning those out on the space station. So in the future, if we needed to replace those, the pieces would be up there to do that. And so again, in that case, we took the shuttle robot arm and grappled to the stowage platform, released it, and then pulled it out of the payload bay, swung it way around to the front of the space station, of the space shuttle, where we met up with the space station arm. And then we literally did a handshake. So we handed the same thing with that, the stubby piece that we added onto the truss. With both of those, we're grabbing onto it with the space shuttle arm, reaching out to the space station arm. The space station arm grabs onto it. So it's kind of like a handshake. And then once we know it's nice and safe, then we release the space shuttle arm. And then using the space station arm, we're able to reach and put it into the proper place on the International Space Station. Great job. If you love math, and you heard from Garrett how important math is, if you love math, you will love not only being a pilot, but also being a flyer of the robot arms, because it is math in action. It's just a ton of fun.
So cool.
So Josh, I got a couple robotic stories about being on the end of it and having the arm fail and be stuck out there in my spacesuit, standing on the end of the arm for being dead in the water for 30 minutes. And I got stories about installing new modules and some cool stuff. But what I'd like to do instead, since we're almost out of time, is I would like to issue a challenge to my 2 colleagues here.
Uh-oh.
And tell you, yeah, it's like that. Kind of
Disapproved. No way.
It's much easier, okay? It has to do with the fact that when we were getting ready last night, we were texting each other about dress code. And Barbara and I said, we got white jackets, we'll wear those. And oh, come on, Scott. And Scott said, well, I'm traveling, I don't have my jacket. but I wear a nice shirt, but from the waist down, I'm clothing optional, right? So here's a challenge. On 3, I want everybody to stand up, okay? 1, 2, 3, stand up, stand up. Who's got pants? Who's got pants? All right.
Challenge accepted. Challenge accepted.
Okay.
But Garrett, did you show them your heels?
I did say I was gonna wear a blue jacket and flats, and so no, actually I got. Yeah.
Oh, it is really raining here. I'm gonna have to evacuate.
Well,
Wow.
that's pretty good timing, Scott. And this concludes the PG-rated section of our programming. No, I just want to say thank you again to Garrett, Scott, and Barbara. You guys are so inspiring. I mean, that hour went by. I feel like it was 15 minutes. I'm sure we could all stay here and talk many more hours and hear all these amazing stories that you had. And maybe we'll do that another day. But I wanted to thank you for your time and for also honing all of your incredible abilities, skills, and talents to help others. That's what Angel Flight is about and gives that opportunity to our volunteers. You guys do it so well. And so thank you for supporting us and for your kind words and your like-mindedness. We really appreciate it, and have really enjoyed getting to know you. For those of you who want to know more about or interact more with Scott, Barbara, and Morgan, or Scott, Garrett, and Barbara, their handles are on the side that you can follow them on their different social media platforms. You can come to Endeavour Awards when we're back in person and meet them in person there. They've got great stories about the Endeavour Space Shuttle and their other space missions there, that over a few drinks, they become a little bit more colored and less guarded. Hard to imagine, I know, after how we concluded that. But guys, thank you again. I really appreciate it. And from all of us at Angel Flight, and especially the families we serve, thank you so much.
And
Thank you.
thank
Thank you
everybody
so
for
much. It's been a
your
pleasure.
Thank you so much. Our
Thank
pleasure.
you for all the great work, especially all the volunteer pilots that volunteer their time and their aircraft. My hat is off to you guys. Thank you very much.
Live long and prosper.
Thanks for getting so safe inside there, Scott. For everyone else viewing, thank you again for your time. That is a valuable thing to give us, and we appreciate your support. I mentioned earlier the different ways you can support us. Henny, we'll drop it in now. We're a team of action. You know, pilots like checklists and things that they need to do. You heard from our pilot astronauts here. They're always going through preparedness. So you can help us in all the ways I talked about, helping us refer to those who need us, plugging us in with healthcare partners, telling your friends and fellow volunteers to sign up, donate, and volunteer. All those things are the ways that you can help right now. And I'll extend, just like Garrett, Scott, and Barbara did, the real angels of Angel Flight are our volunteers. So for those of you already doing that, thank you. For those of you who are donating to help us help others, thank you. And for everyone else that just is supporting us with their prayers, thoughts, and all their good vibes, we say thank you to all of you. And we look forward to joining you in the next Pilot Lounge. Look for those emails. And in the meantime, please don't hesitate to contact us. It's all there in the chat. And thank you. We hope you have a great weekend and happy flying to all of you. Thanks.